The jungle was alive, almost breathing with a presence he couldn't name. Every step he took sent twigs snapping and leaves rustling, echoing like alarms across the dense foliage. The ground beneath him trembled faintly, and in the distance, shadows moved with a deliberate, terrifying weight. He froze, heart hammering, as the unmistakable silhouettes of two towering giantesses emerged between the ancient trees. Their skin shimmered faintly in the dappled sunlight, muscular and deadly, every step a reminder that they could crush him without effort. He had heard the legends, carnivorous predators that hunted men for sport, rulers of this uncharted wilderness. But seeing them in person was far worse than any story could convey. Panic surged through him as he realized there was no path backward, only the looming threat ahead. His mind raced, calculating every possible escape, yet instinct screamed that there was none. He crouched behind a gnarled root, barely daring to breathe, praying the giants hadn't noticed him. And then, as the air quivered with the sound of their footsteps, a flicker of movement caught his eye, something in their expressions that wasn't entirely hunger. For the first time, fear wavered with curiosity, and he sensed that what awaited him might be far stranger than death. He hadn't come to the jungle seeking a fight. He was chasing fortune, adventure, or perhaps just survival in a world that had grown too predictable. Each step deeper into the wilderness had brought whispers of danger, but he never imagined being cornered by creatures of myth. His muscles tensed, reflexes ready, yet even as adrenaline coursed through him, he couldn't shake a growing sense of awe. These weren't merely monsters. They were beings of raw power and intelligence, and in their presence, he felt the fragility of every plan, every skill he had honed for survival. He imagined the worst, being crushed, devoured, erased in moments, but a strange hesitation in their movements suggested otherwise. They weren't advancing blindly. They were watching, communicating in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. His chest heaved, sweat running down his temples, and he whispered to himself, half in disbelief, This isn't what I expected." And yet as he measured the distance between them and himself, a flicker of hope sparked. The idea that perhaps the jungle had more to teach him than terror alone, and that survival might depend not on fleeing, but on understanding the impossible beings before him. The jungle stretched endlessly, thick with twisting vines and colossal trees that blocked out the sun. He stepped carefully, each crunch of leaves underfoot, echoing like a warning. The ground trembled faintly beneath him, and distant roars carried through the humid air. He knew the stories. Two massive, carnivorous giantesses ruled this territory, preying on any intruder. His pulse raced as shadows shifted in the undergrowth, towering shapes moving with predatory grace. Every instinct screamed to run, but the thick roots and uneven terrain made escape nearly impossible. He crouched behind a moss-covered rock, heart pounding, praying the giants hadn't noticed him. A low growl vibrated through the air, and he realized with dawning terror that they had. And yet, there was something in their movement, curiosity perhaps, that made him hesitate before fleeing, an uneasy hope that survival might not be as simple as running. Suddenly, the forest floor quaked beneath two enormous footsteps, and he stumbled backward. The giantesses emerged fully, their immense forms dwarfing the trees around them. Muscles rippled under taut skin, eyes sharp and calculating, mouths hinting at teeth capable of crushing bone. Panic surged, and he bolted, dodging hanging vines and leaping over exposed roots. One of them laughed, a deep, resonant sound that shook the leaves, and he froze. Their gaze was fixed on him, but instead of attacking immediately, they tilted their heads, observing. He noticed gestures, subtle movements, like a conversation he could not understand. Was this a trap, or had he stumbled into something else entirely? He slowed, unsure if fear or curiosity was guiding his steps. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next, and he realized his life might hinge on more than speed. It might depend on understanding. The path narrowed, and the giantesses flanked him from both sides. He pressed against a boulder, sweat running down his temples, heart hammering. Their eyes tracked his every movement, and their claws scraped the dirt with threatening precision. Escape seemed impossible, and every instinct screamed that he was seconds from becoming prey. Yet, something in the air shifted, the way they paused, their heads tilting toward each other, as if debating his fate. He whispered under his breath, "What? What do you want?" One stepped closer, not in attack, but in cautious examination. He held his hands up, hoping to signal peace, though he knew it might be meaningless. The jungle around them was silent, save for the low hum of their voices, almost like a language. For the first time, he realized that brute force alone wouldn't save him. Survival might require trust, or at least patience, with creatures whose motives he couldn't yet read. Hours seemed to pass as he stayed frozen, watching the giantesses move with deliberate grace. One leaned down, sniffing the air near him, and the other tapped her foot against the earth, testing his reactions. Fear still gripped him, but it was accompanied by fascination. These beings were intelligent, capable of thought beyond instinct. Slowly he lowered his hands, careful not to make sudden movements. They exchanged glances, and he caught a hint of amusement in their eyes, as if his fear was a curiosity to them. A subtle shift in posture suggested they were no longer considering him food, at least not immediately. His pulse slowed, and he took a cautious step back, realizing the situation had changed. What he had assumed was certain death now teetered on uncertainty, and for the first time he dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, he could walk out alive. Then, the first giantess spoke, her voice deep and melodic, resonating through the jungle. It wasn't a roar of hunger, but words he couldn't fully comprehend. The second repeated, gestures accompanying her tone, and he realized they were communicating, not attacking. Confusion and relief warred inside him, his mind struggling to process what he saw. They moved toward him slowly, not in menace but with deliberate caution. He stayed still, hands visible, trying to convey that he meant no harm. One of them extended a hand, an invitation rather than a threat. Trembling, he stepped closer. The realization hit him like a shockwave. They had never intended to eat him. The danger had been misjudged, the fear, a misunderstanding. These colossal beings weren't monsters. They were guardians of the jungle, misunderstood by legends. He followed them deeper into the forest, every step careful, every glance wary. The giantesses moved fluidly, creating paths through dense foliage and pointing towards safe spots. He observed their behavior, noticing patterns, gestures, and unspoken rules. Slowly, a fragile sense of trust began to form. He realized that despite their size and power, they were not hostile. They were protective, even curious. As he walked beside them, the forest seemed less threatening, the shadows less oppressive. The jungle, once a place of terror, became a landscape of possibility. For the first time, he felt that cooperation with these beings might allow him not just to survive, but to learn. He began to appreciate their intelligence, their strength, and the unexpected guidance they offered. Hours turned to afternoon, and he noticed subtle details. The giantesses' careful steps, their attention to the environment, and how they interacted with each other. Each gesture conveyed caution, intelligence, and even empathy. He realized the stories he had heard were only half the truth. The monsters were mythologized, misunderstood by those who never saw them. Following their lead, he navigated traps, pitfalls, and natural hazards of the jungle. A new respect grew within him, tempered by awe. Fear was replaced by understanding, curiosity replacing panic. He began to see the jungle not as a hunting ground, but as a complex world with rules he had yet to grasp. The giantesses were teachers, and his survival depended on learning from them. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, they led him to the edge of the jungle. The giantesses stopped, towering above him, eyes glowing softly in the fading light. He realized he had earned their cautious respect. They would not harm him. Stepping into the open, he looked back at them, grateful and amazed. The fear that had gripped him at dawn was gone, replaced by wonder and humility. The jungle still held dangers, but he now understood its guardians. He thought death awaited, but sometimes the monsters we fear are not our enemies. They are guides, teachers, even saviors. With that, he took a deep breath, ready to leave the forest behind, but forever changed by what he had learned. The sun sank behind the jungle canopy, casting golden shadows across the forest floor. He walked forward changed, wiser and wary, yet no longer afraid.